Hello, welcome to the 1st of March update, Connecting Consciousness. Last time I spoke, I said that it was very difficult to give out information, and a number of people who, we know were under a non-disclosure agreements. And when I said that I wasn't going to give any information out, I didn't mean forever. I just meant, while this situation is on. And I will be passing, useful, helpful information when this moment is sort of over, which hopefully, fingers crossed, isn't going to be long. So perhaps, as you would be expecting, I wanted to have a few words on the speech, and I'm sure lots of people have done their take on it. First thing, of course, that struck everybody was that we didn't see a defeated man. We didn't see somebody who was regretful or despondent or sad. We saw somebody who for all intents and purposes appears to be very confident. So what we need to do is to not perhaps take the whole speech, but maybe we need to look at certain words that were dropped in. There was some very interesting numerology stuff, and Tom Numbers needs to get a hand on that and have a look on some of the numbers. For instance, when he started to speak, the timing of when he spoke was very interesting. Right, so maybe you've all picked this all up, maybe you haven't, but he referred to Biden as the chief executive. Now, that's actually technically not accurate, because if you are a president, you are POTUS or president or the boss or what have you. But to be called a chief executive really relates to the corporation of America, and we know that the corporation is broke. And we know that officially because it was lodged as such in Companies House in London, which actually specified that the Corporation of America was dissolved, it's bankrupt. And so during that 1 hour and a half speech, once the president, that's President Trump of course, used the term for Biden as the chief executive, and that's really important. Well, that actually makes a clear distinction between a president and somebody who was not working for the Republic or the Constitution, but working for the corporation. So that I thought was a really interesting information giveaway. And then he made something else which you could take either way. He talked about that Biden is no longer allowed in the White House. So we're trying to work out what he means by that. My understanding was that Biden's probably been in the White House once, possibly once, possibly not at all. We know that the doors were locked to the Oval Office against him as a symbolism. You can't come in, you're blocked out. But the key words that President Trump used were that Biden is no longer allowed in the White House. Now, maybe he means from that speech onwards, there really is an embargo on him. So that was interesting. And then, of course, most debate has been around this so-called third term, whether he means that the second term he didn't get. He won the election, but he didn't get it. So he's going to come back and win a third term, or whether he actually means that he's going to come back and do the second term and then do a historic third term. You'd have to change the Constitution, or you would have to null and void the second election. So at the moment there's a lot of people digging around trying to get hold of those that know, to get clarification. Was President Trump referring to this second election, and was he saying that he didn't say this, but this is my understanding perhaps, is he saying that the military are more than happy to remove the bad guys, but not happy to put in a president? In other words, the military are quite confident in their standing within the Constitution, that they can act to defend the Constitution and therefore remove the corruption, deal with the courts, put a level playing field on. But it is then for the people of America to decide who they want as president. Now, if that's the case, that means another election. Now, the only indicators that there was some truth in this was that, and it received the loudest cheers of the night, was that Trump said that the election must just be over one day. That's quite normal. I mean, here in Great Britain, United Kingdom, our election is on a Thursday, and we know who the Prime Minister is normally the next day, the Friday. So it can be done. Absolutely, it can be done. And maybe what happens is that for absentee ballots or, something like that, you've got to provide, some sort of real solid proof that you are who you are. And if you vote on the day, you take your driving license with you, or something that has a photo identity card. And so that's clearly what he and his team are looking at, and that received a huge cheer. And if we say that the guests at that get together are those that are in the close circle and know people who know people who know people, then the loudest cheers probably are along the topics that are being discussed and the president is giving the green light to. So I think we can clearly say that that's the vision, that the elections are held over one day and the results should be known the following day. So it is reasonably possible to assume that that is what they'll be looking at fairly soon. There'll be other bits that come up from that, and as I say, there's some more obscure stuff that's been hidden in there that numerology will pull out, and that might give us a more of a pointer. So I wanted just to give you that. There always will be a group of people who sort of expected Trump to say that this was going to happen and that was going to happen, and that just wasn't on the cards. The number of people who do know stuff and are absolutely having to be very quiet, and that's always a sign that something is very imminent. If you're 6 months away from something happening, then you tend to allow conversation. But if you are just days or weeks away from something happening, then you tend to want to kill all of the conversation because it's really imminent. And I think that's why we might be, simply because so many of the people that I know are under military NDAs, some are under commercial NDAs, and they've had it made very clear to them that they risk the process, and so they can't afford to do that. And other people like myself who are not under an NDA but have been told there are certain things that we'd rather you didn't talk about, at the moment, and that's I think where we are. So I was quite pleased with the little that was dropped in there. I never expected a call to arms. We weren't going to have that, but I was very pleased with the term chief executive and that odd phrase, Biden is not allowed in the White House. So that was quite interesting, and we have to contrast that with all the stuff that's going on the mainstream. And the president in his 1.5 hours hardly mentioned the media, hardly mentioned them, and that again is very suggestive, where he was really quite angry about the courts. I think he mentioned SCOTUS twice or 3 times, and it's the time he got angry. So that is again quite an important point, because that shows us that the courts were there, or are there, to uphold the Constitution. We don't have one in the United Kingdom really, so it's hard for us to grasp the importance. But in America it's absolutely like apple pie that the court or the courts uphold the Constitution. And the fact they didn't, and the president said they didn't have the guts to do so, and I think he's probably right, really shows that it is the court system that is under the magnifying glass at the moment, at his level, top people level, which we could assume may mean a re-education of judges and lawyers into constitutional law. And so that, I think, is very interesting. And if that happens in America, it'll happen here. We'd have to retrain and reorganize away from, maritime law to common law. So that again would be a very interesting feed across to United Kingdom and other countries. So all in all, I got out of that speech more than I thought. I've seen a lot of comments from people who threw their hands up in the air and say, "Oh, I give up and it's all over." But that was because they were expecting President to say, "We're going to put the tanks on the street and this is going to happen." And it can't happen in a country that's supposed to be a democracy. And just because the bad guys have done what they've done, it means the good guys have got to be a bit cleverer. And so those of us in the know did not expect the president to do that, but we did expect little giveaways. And as I've said to you already, there were some giveaways in there which were very good in terms of what I think they're thinking of and planning on. So that's one talk about that. The other one is the potential move to the new financial system. And I can remember 7-8 years ago, when it was called the reset, and there'll be people who remember it long before I do. And I remember that it was already talked about at top levels, even then, 7-8 years ago. And the stock phrase at the time was, "Don't worry about it, it's all coming down anyway," meaning the financial system is coming down. And we've progressively seen things occurring to move us to a position where we have some confidence that this isn't just a daydream, that it's a very real probability. And in the Daily Telegraph newspaper yesterday, in the front of the business page, seemingly unrelated, was a big section about Lloyds Bank, Barclays to a lesser extent, looking at all of their bankers who have a salary of £1 million or more and deciding to really start sacking them. And what they're getting rid of is not the banks, not the place where you go in and put your 100 quid, where you go in and you take your 100 quid out or whatever it is, not those places, but the glass office blocks where these guys, there's some women, but they're mostly guys, sit on the end of the phone trading our money without our permission, and making usually enormous amounts of money on it. Now, maybe the banks know what's coming, because HSBC is something like 40% reduction now in their office space. Again, that's not the branches, not the bank branches. That's a separate closure program these banks are doing. This is relating to the people that play the big money games. There's a 40%, this is in the mainstream news, it's not in social media, 40% of HSBC reduction in office space. So much so that Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, is really worried about all these banks pulling out their expensive plush offices out of central London. Because goodness knows that the rents are high enough. Who can afford them? If banks can't do it anymore, who can? Maybe make a swimming pool or something. So then there was Lloyds and others all looking to seriously cut back staff earning $1 million. Now, it's not that they're saving money. It's not that they're looking at these guys and saying, you earn $1 million or you earn $1.5 million, so we're going to get rid of you to save the money. What they're saying really is, your job up till now has been to play the markets, to over the weekend start playing with investors' money, people's bank accounts money, and that's what you've done, and that's how you made the profits for us. Well, if under this new system that's not going to be allowed, because that's the whole point in that sense of the word, that those people will no longer have access to the system, so they can't do that. So basically, you put your money in on a Friday, that pound, which was being traded £30 upwards over the weekend, technically under the new system can't be traded. So you don't need these people who earn 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, whatever it is. You don't need them anymore because they can't play those games. They can't take risks with, our money. And that's a very big indicator that they know something's coming down the tracks, because again, it's not social media. This is mainstream media reporting it. So for those of you who are perhaps not quite with it, I mean, we've heard certain commentators until recently, and then people have had to be very quiet. The whole point about it is that it's a different system. It's a good system, and this system has run parallel with what we call the SWIFT, the normal banking system that's used throughout the world. It's the standard. We know that they've been trialing out this new system and running it alongside in some places to see how it worked. And you might remember last week, I think it was, that the Federal Reserve Bank had to be closed because of some sort of cyber attack going on. They had to literally close that down for an hour or so while they cleaned out the system. So all of these things tell me that this is not a daydream, that all the years that I and others have been picking up bits of information about a potential reset or a change probably is founded in truth. Probably founded in truth that a large number of people in very high positions have realized that if you really want to move humanity and you really want to change the way the world thinks, you have to start at the core problem, and the core problem is money. Not money in its sense, because money is a very useful commodity, isn't it? I mean, you can do so many good things with it. You can do bad things, but you can do so many good things with it. So it's not really that, it's how people use it and manipulate it, and how that money comes about. So for instance, if lots of people are killed in South Africa or other parts of Africa over diamonds, and then those diamonds make their way to the West and they're traded and sold, there's a lot of nastiness associated with that product. Monies that have been gained from people's death through drug overdoses, through drug pushing. Again, that's money that's not got that good energy to it. So I think what we're seeing is a large number of people across the planet who have determined that in order to move us forward, then you can't just have a handful of men dictating the whole control system of the planet. It must be a system that's not corruptible. When many people don't realize that gold and silver and precious metals, the price is not market led. There were four men who in London every morning would sit around a table and decide the price of each of those precious metals, and that would be the price for that day, unless there was a massive spike or something. Then they'd get back together again and move it, and they would set a minimum and a maximum for that day. Well, that's got to change, hasn't it? Because if we believe in capitalism in the sense that we believe in a free market economy, then really something should find its own line. More people want it, the higher the price it is. Although I've always had a problem with that, and I've always thought about a little hotel on the south coast, and if you book your hotel in February and it's a price, and then you go in August and it's a price plus 25% or a quarter more or a half more, yet it's the same wallpaper, it's the same bed, it's the same view out of the window, maybe it's a bit more sunny, same staff probably, same breakfast. It's called greed, actually. It's called greed. That, well, more people want it, therefore I can put the price up. Okay, well, what about in this dreadful lockdown situation where so many people can't get to the dentist and they're having to have teeth out? Could you say, well, so many people want teeth out that as a dentist I'm going to charge you double? You wouldn't do that because it would seem as morally wrong, but it's all right in every other respect, isn't it? So you see what I mean, that once you change the financial system and the concept and the values behind it, it does beg a lot of questions around our slavishness to the dictates of money and how that influences our lives. So I think it can only be a good thing, and I do think that we are moving towards a more positive aspect, and what we call the jolly old reset probably is true, although it's got lots of different names now, and we know there's been a long history of the good guys trying to force this into position. And so, I and others are waiting to see if, that's something that can come about, if it's something that, really can happen. Because if it happens, it would be a massive step forward for humanity. If you could take out that handful of people who manipulate for themselves the vast wealth of the planet, and to hell with all the ordinary people, if you can take that out and then change it with a concept that a banking system is just that. It's where you put your money in, because you don't want to put it under the bed any longer. You put your money in and it should be safe, and then you can go and get it out. I mean, I remember 5-6 years ago, it was a terrible worry that the banks in Britain were going to crash, so much so that the government had to order a protecting figure. If you had under a certain amount in a bank, he was guaranteed to be protected. You get it back in about 2 to 3 weeks, but it was guaranteed. That's how close to a sort of a meltdown we were back then. Things have moved on now, and I think it's just very interesting that we've got this quite strong Trump energy, and those around him, far from giving up, actually looking at the next few weeks, shall we say, and we've got this resurgent idea of a new banking type of approach. And if the two could sort of work along side by side, I think that would be remarkable. I don't think one is dependent on the other. In fact, I know it's not. But it would be quite nice that, if something happened in one side, it might happen on the other side. When people who don't know about the topic ask what's the advantage of the new banking system, the stock answer, because you don't want to get into a big debate about stuff that's supposed to be secret, is that you say, if you send money to Japan, it takes 1 second now, which is probably accurate. Or if you're sending money somewhere else, instead of taking 30 minutes or an hour, or 2 days or whatever it is, it's just going to do it in just 5 or 6 seconds. And people will say, oh yeah, that's good, because we all live in a world where we expect things instantaneously. But that's actually just a byproduct of this potential new system. For me, its real importance is the removing from the clutches of the elite group who forever and a day have manipulated and used the system because they were in charge. And there is an argument that says, you the people, let us run it, and maybe you the people decided, no, I'm not going to have that anymore. And so there's all this interesting chatter and talk about when it will happen and if it will happen. And I know it's really hard for everybody, but who are the last to know? The last to know are the people who don't have an influence at that level. And what they used to say in America, and indeed in Germany from 43 onwards, on a need to know basis, a compartmentalized understanding. And so, just because it's not widely talked about doesn't mean it's not happening. Just because something is not there, everyone is a researcher now. And so you'll hear something on one site and then you'll go and see if it's repeated on another site. And the problem is that if you do hear it repeated on another site, the way the human psyche works is that individual believes that has validated the first report. You hear the first report, you hear 2 or 3 others which go, oh, that's validated it. Well, not if they're all wrong. Not if all the others copied the first one and the first one was wrong. It doesn't validate anything. And so unfortunately you can get into this sort of whirlpool of going round and round and round, and we can see some of the most ridiculous and ludicrous stuff which is just nonsensical. Although having said that, I was shown a very interesting short repetitive 3-second video clip of a supposed alien, tall grey would call them, always done against a black background when they're fake, you see. And and I said, looks fake to me, but whoever has done that absolutely knows what they're doing. In other words, they've either seen this creature themselves and they've created it, or someone has described it so well to them they can do it, and it turned out to be from the X-Men. But that's exactly how you drop information, and so it is on social media, because certain sites are approved, certain individuals are approved, and what those individuals will do is drop information. Now sometimes the information they drop from the good guys is deliberately misleading. Now I know you would say, well, why would a good guy send misleading information? If you have knowledge that the negative forces are following a particular individual or a particular channel, then you will add misleading information, even though it might upset 100,000 people who feel, oh, well, why have they done that? If it just affects that one bad person and they make decisions or report decisions on which affect their operation, then the good guys think that's a price worth paying. That's the way it is at the moment. There is a bit of a unseen covert war taking place at the cyber level, and it's a shame in the sense of, because nothing's public, nothing's obvious, it's very hard to sustain your enthusiasm or your belief when things are happening, and it even makes it into the mainstream. Then you feel, well, there are things happening and there is truth behind it. But when it's all hidden and there appears to be nothing going on, and people just sending memes to each other or cartoons or caricatures, and they're sustaining this blazing interest through nonsense like that, well, no, that isn't much help, is it? Do you want to come up there? Just come up for a minute, because quietly, sit there quietly. I know, sit there quietly. So what we have to do is we just have to realize that it is nearly at the top of the mountain. The 3 months ago, the dates that I were given for something interesting to occur haven't quite arrived yet. So 3 months ago I was given quite a layout of dates, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the Trump speech was on the last day of February. Now I know that traditionally on the 4th of March the president makes a State of the Nation or a speech of some sort. It's traditional. I think what we were looking for is who actually makes a speech on the 4th, in the sense that will Biden make some sort of speech, and will Trump make a counter speech, or what is going to happen? I know a lot of people are talking about the next key thing is Biden doing some sort of talk. And so what I'm saying is that in summation then, is that I got quite a lot out of that Trump speech. I know that people who look at the numbers will get something more out of it, because everything is Q related with Trump. Absolutely it is. And if people don't believe that, well, it's because you don't have a concept of the numbers, and I only had a very general concept of the numbers. That's why I was very pleased to connect with Tom Numbers to be able to give me a deeper understanding, because Trump really does understand it. And so a lot of the stuff, the symbology that he does, or the words he uses, like 17 flags behind him, there's your symbology and things like this. And I've seen on a live link, I've seen him at one of his outside rallies draw a large Q in front of the crowd and put the stick through it, a capital Q, put the stick through it. Now this is not coincidence, and And we know it's not coincidence, because if you go onto YouTube and you talk about Q, etc., they take you down. Well, if it was all nonsense and didn't mean anything, they wouldn't bother. They wouldn't take you down. So we know that when people talk the truth, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter take you down, and that's very interesting. And one of the reasons I got taken down, was because we spoke the truth, and that's why we were taken off YouTube and taken off Facebook, because somebody doesn't like the truth.